So what do we do with this file? Well, let's exit out, and we're going to see in this directory that we just have this one file. It's barely a K in size. It's obviously doesn't have anything in it other than the text, but it's the instructions on how to build our image. So the from command, when I build this image, is going to actually pull that Debian Jessie image from Docker Hub down to my local cache, and then it's going to execute line by line each of those stanzas inside my Docker engine and cache each of those layers. So let's type Docker image build, and we're going to tag it. Remember, that's the name that we're going to give an image. And since I'm going to only use this image locally, I don't have to use my Docker Hub account name. I can call it whatever I want. So I'm going to call it custom nginx, and I'm going to put a dot here, which basically says build the Docker file in this directory. And you'll see as it steps through this that each step is a line in the Docker file that it's executing inside this image as it's building it. And then there's a little hash at the end, which is actually the hash it keeps in the build cache, so that next time we build this thing, if that line hasn't changed in the Docker file, it's not going to rerun it. And this is one of the magic pieces of why Docker makes deployment and software building so fast, is it actually is intelligent enough to cache the steps in the build. So quite often after you've built an image the first time and you're really just there changing your custom source code and not necessarily changing the application in it itself, all this installation stuff has already happened. So you will have very short build times. Okay, so now we're done building. That took about a minute. But what if I go back in that file? I'm going to add an additional exposed port. And for example, I'm just going to do 8080. Now that doesn't mean that nginx is smart enough to know that I'm opening this port or that it's in any way communicating with nginx. It's just me allowing the container to receive packets on that port. Now just to be sure, let's do a docker image ls, and we'll see right up at the top that it auto tagged it as latest, right? Because we only called it the repository name. We didn't actually give it a : tag name when we tagged it. So let's build it again. So wow, that was fast, right? That only took us a couple of seconds. And you'll notice that on each step, it'll say using cache. Starting with step 2, it'll say using cache on 3, using cache on 4. On 5, it recognizes on step 5 that that line is different. So it actually executes that into the container. And then on step 6, it has to rerun that line, because the minute a line changes, every line after that now has to be rebuilt as well. And so this brings up the point about the ordering of your lines in your Docker file. Because if you get things out of order, for instance, if you copy the code in, let's say you're building a website, if you're copying the software code that you're creating at the very beginning of the file, then every time you change a source file and you rebuild, it's going to have to build the entire Docker file again. So it's critically important for your sanity and time that you usually keep the things at the top of your Docker file that change the least, and then the things that change the most at the bottom of your Docker file.